Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sam Bass. I'm with the Market Intelligence team here at Open Minds. And today, as part of our weekly private roundtable series, we have Open Minds Vice President Emily Corrins and Executive Vice President John Seymour, and they'll be discussing how to build a virtual marketing strategy. Emily brings nearly 20 years of healthcare marketing and communications experience to the Open Minds team, having started her career as a program manager for the Allegheny County Health Department, where she developed and delivered behavior change and education programs designed to prevent chronic diseases in vulnerable populations throughout Greater Pittsburgh. Ms. Corns brings a similar focus on population health, wellness, and nutrition expertise to Open Minds. John Seymour brings a wealth of experience in strategy, development, M&A in marketing and healthcare, consumer packaged goods, and for-profit education industries. Mr. Seymour has deep expertise in market assessment and development and new product launches. Now, before we get started today, we have a couple of brief housekeeping reminders. First, while you are muted during today's briefing, we're open to any questions you may have. Please feel free to submit those in the question box, and John and Emily will have time at the end to answer them. And then secondly, the recording and PowerPoint from today's presentation will be available tomorrow on the Open Minds website. And without further ado, I'll leave you with John and Emily.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, John. Hi, everybody out in the audience. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are at. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And today, John and I will be having a conversation about virtual marketing strategy for a new era of service delivery. And just to share that this is complementary to some other great sessions that we're offering to our elite members. A few weeks ago, we had a session on marketing planning. I know that we have some sessions on website design. And these informational sessions go together. So we'll refer you back to some previous sessions and encourage you to attend some of the website design sessions coming, where you can do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the things that we're talking about today. But what you can expect to hear about today is why digital strategy and your website matter right now, how to build an online brand that attracts new consumers to your practice, to your organization, how to drive traffic to your website through content marketing, and how to leverage both traditional and non-digital media to boost your online success. So when we think about virtual marketing strategy, and especially coming out of a pandemic period when many organizations are in a business recovery mode, we thought we would just set the stage with some of the trends that are driving the industry towards a virtual experience, towards a virtual consumer experience. So especially through the pandemic, I think all of us can agree that virtual really is the new way of doing business. Here we are doing a virtual presentation, a webinar, but this is probably the fifth or sixth thing I've done today that has been virtual and video based, and I think many of us are experiencing that now, including our patients and our clients. So it's become a way of life post pandemic, so it's just the new way of doing things. There's also a substitution of new technologies for traditional services. So if I think back, Sam had mentioned my work started back in chronic disease management. Now I've spent a lot of years now in the food and beverage industry working on marketing campaigns for some food and beverage manufacturers before I made the pivot back into healthcare. But I started out as a dietitian, and I remember 20 plus years ago when I was getting educated as a clinical dietitian, we learned how to do a lot of nutrition analysis, and a lot of it was somewhat paper-based, or we would look at diet plans and calculate calories and macros and all of these things. And now you can find software that will do the same thing that we spent so much time doing early in my career as a dietitian. So that's what we mean by substitution of new technologies for traditional services. A lot of the diagnostic tools that we used to have to do by hand can now be done with software, with automation, with artificial intelligence. There's also aggressive new competition from existing health and human service organizations. Everybody is kind of competing for the same set of consumers. They tend to be competing for the same set of dollars, whether that's donors or grant funding or other funding sources. And now we have new out of industry competitors too in the health and human service space. So I know that Monica had just written an article not too long ago about the new role of pharmacy in healthcare. I think we've seen the proliferation of minute clinics and walk-in urgent care in the pharmacy space, and now that's moving into behavioral health as well. And then, just adapting to the new realities of virtual business, it's critical to survival. The expectations from consumers about what can be done virtually is much higher than it's ever been before. So, if you put yourself into the mind of the consumer, we're very used to an Amazon world now. We're very used to a consumer experience where we can push a button and have something delivered to our house. So you have to remember that consumer experience, even though it's not necessarily with the services that we offer in the health and human service space, that expectation now is there on the retail side of things, and that's the way that the market is moving. And finally, but not least importantly, is that inclusion and cultural sensitivity. These are central to business. So making sure that whenever we're thinking about our digital strategy, that we're also making sure that we're representing all of the clients and consumers in a way that is appropriate, that's sensitive to their needs. It's not a buzzword. It's really the way of doing good business. So taking with that context, we'll talk a bit about building your online brand. So we're going to talk about knowing the purpose of your website, knowing your audience, using good design, and then how we can engage and convert online. If you think that you do not have a brand, you are incorrect. Your brand is the perception that people have of your services, of your providers, of your outcomes. And you can either influence that brand by creating your own online presence and telling the stories that you want to tell. If you're not out there doing that, people are going to tell those stories for you, particularly in this age of star recommendations online, where people can just go into Google and they can write a review of your organization. You have to remember that your online brand, your online reputation, it matters, and that's how people are going to evaluate your services and your offerings. So it is important to understand that you have a brand, and that doesn't just mean your logo. It's your reputation, it's the way that you appear in listings on websites online. And even though there are many digital channels, and we'll talk about some of them today, and in some organizations, they choose to even possibly bypass a website and just really focus their efforts on social media or other channels. I think still in the health and human services industry, the website is still critically important. So we're gonna spend time there because it really is central to building that brand. It's central to drive traffic and get the right messages out. So we're going to talk about multi-channel strategies, but that website is still critically important to support your mission. And it really should be designed to support the objectives of your organization. In our last discussion, John and I had talked about marketing planning and setting a marketing strategy. So we won't go into that, but assuming that you have put together a marketing plan and you have a marketing plan and strategy that matches the strategic objectives of your organization, the website should flow off of those priorities. So whether it's growing your consumer base, whether it's acquiring new health plan contracts, Could be expanding into new regions, adding service lines. For many organizations right now, it's just attracting and retaining really great clinical staff. Whatever the priorities are for your organization, you need to make sure that your website is aligned to that. Again, in our last session, we talked about knowing your target audience, so we're not going to spend a lot of time there, but once you've identified what those priorities are for your organization, you need to think about who are the audiences that you're speaking to as part of that strategy. So as an example, if you're talking about increasing your revenue and referrals, your consumers and family members and caregivers are very important to that strategy. So are your referral sources. When you're designing your website, you should really be speaking to them as part of that strategy. If you're trying to retain and acquire top talent, you're going to be looking at thinking about how are prospective employees going to be looking at your website. What about other larger organizations and ACOs where you could potentially attract talent from? Those are some examples of how to align your website to your stakeholder group. When we do our marketing planning seminar, which is a longer kind of deep dive into marketing planning, we talk about creating customer journey maps. This is particularly important whenever we're thinking about our digital strategy. So once you've identified who those stakeholders are that you're talking to as part of your strategy, you need to step back and think about how they interact with your business and your brand online. And it helps you to spend your precious time and resources within your organization on the online channels that are going to have the most impact. So this is actually a really great exercise to do with your team to create a customer journey map. When I've done this with leadership teams before, we've really sat down and thought about one of our key audience, our key audience. Maybe if your key audience is caregivers who might be connecting clients to your services. If you think about that caregiver and actually think about who they are and give them a name, give them a face, and then think about the steps or the journey that that caregiver would take to find you or your competition online. What are some of the words they might use? How might they search for that information online? What are some of the influencing websites that they might be visiting to get additional information? Are they going to be getting referrals from their insurer that are going to drive to your information? So think through that whole process of how they find you online. And it's actually what we've done before is actually taken flip charts, put a person's face up there, given them a little profile and started to map out this journey. And it's a really great exercise for your leadership team to think through this process. And that all of that data that you're gathering helps to inform that website brand and design. So you really want to think about what should that audience see when that customer journey finally leads to your website. And you want to think about what is it about your organization that makes it special? What's that unique selling proposition? That should be pretty apparent as soon as somebody comes to your homepage. What can they expect from their experience with your organization? So this would be the services and outcomes. And then finally, how can they connect with your organization? So this would be the customer service experience that they can achieve on your website, and how can they take action? So when we talk about the elements of design, these are three of the key things that we're looking at in terms of good website design. Is it telling your unique story? Is it telling about the experience they can expect from you? And is it telling how they can connect with you? And again, there is a whole another web series about website design where you can really talk to the experts about design and ask them questions. But at a high level, you want to make sure that the website has a very clear purpose. When we're talking about building our online brand, somebody should be able to visit your website, that homepage, and really know who you are and what you're about. It should be using modern technology and design. At a minimum, it needs to be mobile friendly. In today's era, many of us are using a smartphone. Simplicity and user experience, that's that UX. Simplicity is crucial. And just remember, put yourself always in the, you are a consumer of websites, and just, you need to think about your own behavior and how you peruse a website. Your consumers are doing the same thing. So they scan rather than read. They're only looking about 20% of the homepage content whenever they visit the website. So you need to make sure that the navigation is very simple, very intuitive, and consistent in terms of the UI or the user interface. You want to make sure that for your audience that your website is accessible. The American Disability Association has an entire set of principles and guidelines to design against for website accessibility. So you want to make sure that whether you're designing in-house or you're working with an external designer, that they're keeping those principles in mind. And make sure that it has a visual hierarchy that makes sense, where the elements are really arranged in order of importance. You want to make sure that your content is user-centered. I know with a number of organizations I've worked with, we tend to be, when we sit around the table, we think of the things that are important to us as providers. So it might be a new therapeutic treatment. It might be a new provider, a new tool that we're working with that we think is really, really great. And we want to go into that information and in great detail. But the website content is really not meant to be focused on the organization. It's meant to be focused on the user. So you want to make sure you're writing it with that user in mind and not necessarily the organization in mind. We had talked about mobile-friendly responsive times with making sure it's really fast. You can actually test your site at Think with Google just to get a little test of how fast and mobile-friendly your website is. If you haven't used this before, I just wanted to share that URL. And ooh, my numbering is off. Sorry about that, folks. When we think about calls to action, try to make sure that your call to action is in one color and it's not used anywhere else on the site. That will help to cue people visually that there's something to do there and an action that can be taken. And then last but not least are customer service features for your website. Depending on the technology that you have behind the scenes, you might be able to do video chats, video visits, and telehealth, have people pay bills online, schedule appointments online, patient portals. If you have those capabilities within your organization, make sure that that's apparent on your website and make sure that it's really easy for people to see. I know that it's always nice to see an example of good design and how it aligns to strategy. So Teros Health is an organization that I know that we featured a few times at Open Minds. It's a terrific organization with a great leadership team. And you can read some case studies about Teros that have been that we've conducted with partners relative to their work in integrated care. And it's a great story, but part of their strategy at Teros as an integrated provider organization is to they started out in behavioral health, and they've been a very early adopter of a whole person care model. But part of their strategy is to add they have a no wrong door approach to their business. So whether people are coming in through mental health services, whether they're coming in through substance use disorder services, they want to make sure that they have a great experience and there's no wrong door where they can enter the Teros Health family. But they would like to grow the number of people who are entering through primary care. They've made an investment as an organization in expanding their primary care services. So it's a critical part of their growth strategy. And if you look at their homepage, there's a lot of things that I like about this. First of all, it's very aligned to that strategy. If you look at it, they're making it very easy on their homepage to schedule a primary care appointment. At the top, I'm not sure if you can see this, but they're making it very easy to get a COVID vaccine. They're making it very easy to schedule a health exam. And as an organization, they've invested in the technology behind the scenes to be able to do all of these things, to schedule an appointment, to pay a bill online. But you can see that the call to action, as we talked about, it's in a very bright, it's a distinct color. Contact us, schedule a health exam, sign up. They've made that very distinctive. They've put, it's visually very appealing. It's simple, it's streamlined, but you know what Teros Health is about whenever you come to this homepage. So I think it's a really great example of good website design that aligns with strategy, has a clear call to action as well. We're going to take a pause here because we're going to start to talk about content to generate referrals and engagement. And I wanted to give John a chance to chime in on anything as we move through the presentation, and also give you a chance to ask questions on the chat feature.
I was thinking, right up front when you're talking about just the move to virtual, and that's just the reality. I came from a behavioral health organization. And just, I think a data point that we all know about is just the amount of money that is going into digital health. I mean, you had the Teladoc Livongo deal was like a $15 billion deal. I mean, so that's, I think that's just going to even, and COVID clearly accelerated that, as we all know. And it's interesting because I was working with a client, Rogers, and they were like, so this expansion of digital health is great for the consumer because they have access and more choices. But what he was seeing were, there's already a shortage of talent, and people were, stealing some of his. So it's good, but it's also even increased the shortage of talent. But and then kind of pivoting, you talked about what was it? Just knowing who your target is. I mean, I think that's got to be foundationally where everything starts, whether it's offline or online. And an example for me that I remember, and it was a kind of a retargeting. So I headed up the New Jersey anti-tobacco program, and one of the initiatives was we were trying to get a cessation program, trying to help smokers quit. And we had two programs called QuitNet and QuitLine. It kind of dates me, but so either you call or you go online to get support. And kind of results were kind of languishing. I think we had 20,000 enrollees in 2 years, and it was kind of flat. And our kind of messaging or positioning was really, it was broadly targeting all smokers. And it was, I don't want to say it was shaming, but we were telling them how bad it was. And well, everybody knows that. And we're trying to spark behavior change and get them to enroll. And so we kind of pivoted and we said, you know what, because if we knew if we could get these folks enrolled, we could help increase success rate of quitting from 25 to 75%. That's a huge lift. So we decided we're gonna focus on smokers who want help. They've kind of raised their hand, and it was a "we are there for you" was the positioning, and it was a dramatic increase. So we got 100,000 enrollees in the first year of that new positioning and campaign. And lesson learned. I mean, in the behavioral health space, shaming doesn't work. But again, I think what that is you can't. It sounds so complicated. Can't be all things to all people, but make sure you nail the. It's really nail the target and build the content to drive engagement with that target.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about that content. And we're thinking about content in the context of generating referrals and engagement. But again, this is engagement around your strategy, whatever that is that you're trying to achieve through your digital marketing efforts. whether it is really focused on attracting and retaining top talent, or whether it's about donors, making sure that you're making that really easy. This is really about how to use content to bring that strategy to life. And really, content rules in this digital era. Even before the pandemic hit, we saw, and I have a nice video from Comcast of how content usage has changed really just since 2017, and you see how much more video we're using over time, and that just really exploded during the pandemic. So video and very visual content is really taking center stage in terms of digital strategy. But other pieces of content still matter very much. But the content has a role on your website. Good content is going to engage your visitors. It's going to get them to take action. So whether your strategy is you're thinking through a sales and services strategy and marketing, or whether you're trying to develop a thought leadership strategy, or a strategy around education and information, or public relations, your marketing plan is probably going to have elements of all of this, but you're going to need really great content in order to achieve it. And this visual just demonstrates that you plan content, you produce the content, then you promote the content, and then you see the payoff, whatever that payoff is to you, whether it's new appointments, whether it's new referrals, whether it's new donations. This is the virtuous content cycle. So if you think about sales and matching your content to your purpose and your audience. We'll talk a little bit more about audience match in a moment. But if you think about your sales and services strategy, the type of content you want to pay attention to in that strategy is your page copy and your pictures. Is it very easy for people to get the information they need about your sales and services? It's still important, even though people are getting away from printing as much as we used to. It's very nice to have downloadable collateral materials that people can download, and print-friendly collateral that they can download from your website. Patient testimonials here, and not just patient, consumer testimonials, client testimonials are really, really key. Caregiver testimonials, virtual tours, assessments. These are what we call sticky pieces of content that make people stay in your digital channel, whether it's hosted on the website, whether you're driving the content through your social media channel. It's giving people the information that they need to start to make a decision about your services and whether you're the right fit. If we think about a thought leadership strategy, this is where you want to highlight your research, any white papers that you produce, any podcasts with thought leaders within your organization, whether your providers, any research that you're doing, that making sure that you're people learn by seeing, they learn by reading, they learn by hearing. Try to get that information to them in as many different ways, package it as many different ways as you can, so that you're touching people with the information in a way that is useful to them. This could be your leader bios, your videos on your website, and career information and talent attraction content is key here as well. And then if your strategy is around educating and informing, again, engaging people so that they can make thoughtful decisions about their care, about their treatment, this is your directions, your contact information, any e-learning that you have available for the public, or even for staff, your health-related articles, chat bots, whether they're instant response, artificial intelligence behind that, or an actual person responding. This falls into that education and information, as well as infographics, so that really visual content that help people when they're scanning. And finally, your public relations strategy. This is where you keep your press releases, your About Us section, videos and pictures that demonstrate your community and engagement, your calendar of events. All of these pieces of content engage people. They help with search to drive traffic to your website, so that you're top of mind for people whenever they are in need of services like your organization provides. I did want to make note, as in addition to the content having a role in the strategy, remember that your pictures are content too, and you want to make sure that your pictures are speaking to the audience that that you're trying to reach. It has been a challenge for a long time that stock photography that we use for our websites, for our marketing, isn't as diverse and inclusive as it's needed to be. It's getting better, but it still has a long way to go. So whenever you can, using actual patient photos, whenever you can do that photo shoot that shows real people who use your services, that's what people want to see. They want to see people like me. But even if you have to use stock photography, make sure that the stock photography that you're using is representative of the population that you're serving or that you're trying to serve. I loved hearing about the Dove Show Us campaign. I think they've done a tremendous service in terms of just, they've added like 10,000, I think, stock photos that are available for download for nonprofits. There are licensing fees if you're a for-profit organization, but these photos, that's where I got this one, are available for download. So just make sure that your content really matches your audience that you're trying to serve. This is a slide about engagement versus, not engagement versus conversion, but engagement to conversion. So when you have really good content on your website or on your digital property, whether it's your social media channels or different podcasts that you're doing, you want to get from engage to conversion. Engage says, I'm interested in what you're saying, and conversion means, to us means I'm in. I'm bought into what you're saying, and I'm going to take that next step. So engage me. These are just some examples, but liking or commenting on a post that you've made on social media, taking a virtual tour of your facility, downloading a white paper, getting directions from an online map on your site. Those are clear indicators that somebody is interested in your services, and all of these are trackable as well. Conversion, they're taking it to that next step. They're actually attending an event or a webinar that you're hosting where you're talking about some new treatments. They're scheduling that admissions visit and showing up to it. They're setting an online appointment. They're writing a positive review about your organization. They're referring a friend or relative. So to get from engagement to conversion, sometimes you have to ask people to take that next step and make it as easy as possible for them. So that's where having those really, really clear call to actions on your digital properties is key. Reminding people, for example, that they can leave a nice Google review if they're in your office. I know I've in organizations where I've worked, we have signs posted around to give people information on how to write a Google review, and encouraging them, if they haven't had an experience, if they haven't had a 5-star experience, to make sure that they're talking to somebody at the office to talk about how we can do better. So you have to ask people to take that next step. Just don't assume that they're going to be able to do it on their own. You sometimes have to guide them through that journey of conversion. And just to reinforce that, make every click count. So you want to turn an engagement into action. I use the term leads here. Depending on what type of organization you're in, a lead could be a new client, it could be a new donor, but it's basically turning that engagement into action. So making sure that when people are scheduling an appointment or taking that assessment or taking a virtual tour or downloading the ebook that you've provided, that you're collecting that contact information, those interests, and their organization information, and then getting back to them. Maybe you're recontacting them with more customized marketing. So if somebody has taken the time to download the ebook, it's absolutely appropriate for you to follow up and say, hey, did you take anything away from this? Is there anything that we can help you with? Or if somebody's taken a virtual tour, to take that follow-up step and ask if they would like to come in for a visit or schedule an appointment. And you can have a CRM system, a customer relationship management system in the background. It could just be an Excel spreadsheet where you're tracking this information, but don't just collect information and then not do anything with it. Make sure that you're taking that engagement and following up. All right, we'll take another pause here because we're going to be moving on to our final section around using multiple channels. And I've been talking a lot. I wanted to give John the opportunity to chime in and for those on the line to ask any questions.
Yeah, I was most recently at a private equity-backed behavioral healthcare company. We bought a facility in Annapolis, and it was 100% their leads were paid search. And at the time, Google AdWords, the addiction treatment industry, it was the most expensive of all. So we were paying a lot of money. So we clearly knew we needed to pivot, and we wanted to get to, say, 50% of organic in unpaid search. And so a lot of it is, I don't want to say simple blocking and tackling, but it's all, you talk about content. So we hired a content person so it was kind of twofold. It was, what does Google reward? And it's content, it's relevant content. And it's just churning the blogs out, the white papers out and then it's like, how do we then go from engagement to conversion? And we want people to call. So it's how, when they, let's make sure, like to your point, we have real people. We have the faces of the people who are going to care. So things that are going to engage them and have them call. And obviously using data to measure everything, and yep. Which you can now in the digital world. And so with a couple of simple kind of tactics, we were able to get to 50, a more balanced referral share. So we got to 50%. Took 6 months, but yeah. So simple, but it's all driven by content and engaging the consumers.
Yep. It absolutely is. Content is king or queen or ruler of a digital strategy. That's for sure. So, think when we were talking about marketing planning in the last session, thinking about that content person. So I think it's interesting, John, that your organization actually made the investment in somebody who is a good content writer. That's an important part of your team. And you might be surprised who you find in your organization that has that kind of skill, but it's about it's writing well, writing for the audience that's appropriate, organizing it in a way that makes sense, that visual design, making it very compelling. And it doesn't have to be somebody that you hire internally. Those are things that you can outsource too, or you can blend it together and have internal content development as well as external content development for the more sophisticated pieces. But it's a really important part of your strategy.
And it needs to be refreshed and refreshed.
Yes.
And refreshed.
Yeah, it can't be static. Yeah, that doesn't. If they look at your site or your social media channel one day and then 6 months later it looks exactly the same, that is not compelling. So make sure that you're changing it up. All right, and then we'll talk about using multiple media channels to drive traffic. So some of us are going to get, and I probably put myself in this camp as well, where I grew up on traditional media. I'm kind of I guess sort of tech native in my generation, but I'm still very much like a paper book and a newspaper and and watch TV. So we can't abandon those traditional forms of media because we have, first of all, you have generations that cross, and you are probably not serving only millennials in your world, but you have to cross generations. And also those other forms of media, they play a really key part of your marketing strategy. And so when we talk about traditional and digital media, it's and, not versus. So your digital strategy is not in place of an overall media strategy that includes traditional media. You have to merge them together. So the benefits of having a strong digital strategy are the kind of direct interaction that you get with your audience in a digital space. So you can really have kind of a two-way dialogue with your audience. They can interact with you very easily in a digital environment, and it's very targeted and very measurable. And a digital strategy, if I think about digital ad buying, you can actually geolocate your ads. So if you're just trying to target women of a certain age, you can actually digitally, geo-target your ad buying so that you're showing digital ads at certain salons or places where women, might tend to have more foot traffic than men. So you can get very, very targeted in your advertising, which is great, and it's very, very measurable. But it can, if you're not using traditional media sources, then you're missing out on your broader audience that help to generate that brand awareness, that word of mouth. So the traditional media channels are great places to promote a brand message to a mass audience, and it also can convey third-party credibility with reputable and trusted outlets. So in many places, where there still is a local paper, I know I live in a town where we still have a local paper, that have that kind of third-party credibility of having your ad in the paper, makes it in some ways more reputable and trusted. So they do work together. But ultimately, your traditional, not digital strategies have to help support your digital strategy. So if we look at the total marketing mix, it might include some or all of these pieces. So when we talk about digital, that's your email campaigns, your social media, your search strategy, your website, your text messaging strategies, your streaming ads. You might have a broadcast strategy as well, where you're doing television or radio spots. You might have print advertising, where you're doing newspaper or magazine ads. You might be doing out-of-home billboards, bus signage, direct mail, that downloadable collateral or print collateral that you might find in your office, in your waiting room, where you want people to learn more about providers and services. And then we called out social media separately here because there are multiple channels that you might be using in your social media, and each one of them has a different purpose. So your Instagram versus Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, they all speak to a bit of a different audience, but they can all work together. So you just want to make sure that with each of these campaigns, no matter what the mix is, that they all have some sort of conversion call to action. So your print advertising in your newspaper or magazine could still and should still have some sort of call to action to perhaps take an assessment on your website or to book an appointment on your website. They might also have a telephone number to call, but just make sure that you're trying to link your channels together, no matter what type of marketing channel you're using. We wanted to talk a little bit more about social media and how to use it to drive conversion. And I know this, I recognize that even having this up here, I don't have TikTok, which has overtaken, I think, Facebook in terms of downloadable apps. And there's a place for TikTok in your social media strategy too. This is the place where we tell the stories, where you promote the testimonials, the positive messages about your brand. You might share preventative healthcare tips. You can use different forms of multimedia, whether it's videos or pictures or infographics and charts. These are great places to include survey links if you want to get a little bit of feedback on a new service that you're offering or new services that maybe you should be offering. Social media is a great place to do this. It's about engaging your audience. You can also use it to collect contact information, to do that retargeting, promotional outreach. You can provide incentives for referrals. So social media, it's not going to make up all of your digital strategy, but it's a very important part of your digital strategy in terms of content development. And again, the audience for each of these is just a little bit different. So you want to make sure that you understand the Facebook audience versus the Instagram audience, the LinkedIn audience versus the TikTok audience, and develop content and push out content that makes sense for that group. And then finally, with all campaigns, with all marketing campaigns, and really with any strategy, you just want to measure your results. You want to gather the data, try to set goals for each campaign that you're working on, establish the results that you want to measure, and then see how it's doing. Assess, analyze, improve, develop the results, get feedback, and then gather the results, get feedback, and then adjust your plan accordingly. If you found that if you're trying to use your digital strategy to schedule more appointments and you're finding that you are flat, as John said, it's time to dig in, try to understand some of the drivers behind that, and then adjust the strategy accordingly. So in terms of the content for this presentation, we are at the end of the session, but I would like to share some additional resources that we have available for our elite members on openminds.com. You may have read Monica's email last week. Are you breaking through the noise? Do consumers know what you know? This was a nice overview of quantum marketing, which is basically all of these channels that we just talked about kind of working together. Some other resources in terms of your virtual strategy. You operate virtually, you serve virtually, but are you marketing virtually? These are all available to you on the Open Minds website, and I definitely recommend that you take a look at them. If you're not already signed up for Management Best Practices Institute next week, we are doing the full marketing seminar, marketing planning seminar at Management Best Practices Institute in California and virtually. And we also have some terrific keynotes planned and some terrific seminars planned for next week. So I hope that you plan on attending. So John, anything, or Sam, do we have any questions, or John,
Well,
anything that you want to add?
I was just going to say, you know, you're talking about you want to measure everything, and I think early on, one of my bosses said, you know, everything is a test, and I kind of believe that. So it's like, do your pre and post analysis, and it's funny when you talked about, and I totally believe in the integrated marketing. In having multiple different mediums, whether it's driving awareness, engagement. But it was interesting. So the residential treatment program that I mentioned that we acquired, one of the things we did in addition to digital, we thought we did a test. We did print, we did outdoor, and we did radio. And we just thought, let's test it in conjunction with, you know, an investment with the content person, and it didn't move the needle at all. It just at the end of the day, it taught us a couple of things. One, it's focus, do more of what's working and less of not. So we pulled the plug on all the outdoor and the radio. But I also thought it was interesting too. It's like, it's really understand your media choice should really be dovetail with how your consumer engages either the product or the company. Well, we really realize that when somebody's ready to go to treatment, they're not, a billboard isn't going to, they're going online to do search. So lesson learned. But again, use the data to do more of what's working and less of what's not working. That's what I.
Yep, absolutely. But that is absolutely true. And then, you know, there also is a place for the billboard in terms of brand awareness. And so but once people are at the point of decision, the billboard doesn't help. The billboard helps to let people know out in the community that you have services that you're offering. But once they reach that point of decision, you have to make sure that you're meeting them at that point of decision. And that's where you need to make those really smart choices about the content and your digital strategy. It's a good point, John.
I think that's actually a good segue here into our first question from the audience. And they asked, with such great focus being on digital marketing, has it actually opened up any opportunity for traditional or conventional marketing? Like, for example, will telemarketing or direct mail be more impactful because less people are doing it? And then how has that affected like those traditional metrics where, like, you know, if you placed 100 calls, you could get 10 people on the phone. Of those 10 people, you could get one conversion. Like, have those changed in light of everything?
That's a good question. With I think direct mail has probably become more effective in the digital era. And it's for some of the reasons that you alluded to. You know, because of the shift of budget to digital, direct mail is pretty expensive. If you're going to put out a direct mail piece, it's, you know, it's not just the printing and production cost, but the cost of postage has gone up. So it's quite an investment. Fewer people are doing it. So for when you do get a nice direct mail piece, I think people are paying more attention to it. And if you have a digital call to action on your direct mail piece that makes it really easy for people to take that next step without talking to a live person. You're not going to see as much ROI probably on sending out a direct piece that just has a phone number, because people still want to take that next step on their own time. But if you send out a direct mail piece that has some sort of digital call to action, I think that we see increased effectiveness of direct mail. I would not say necessarily that in the switch to digital that that call outs, the calling piece has been more effective. I think, you know, just with the proliferation of cell phones where and call blocking features, you're really getting a pretty small set of the population that will still answer the phone and take a marketing call or do a survey. It's not that they're again, it has a place in the marketing mix, but I think it's a much smaller place than it used to be. So I think the switch to digital, long answer to what was a short question, has probably opened up some space in direct mail that had gotten pretty cluttered before the digital age, but has probably reduced the relevance of I want to call it telemarketing. I think there's a new word for it, but it's probably reduced the impact of telemarketing because people are just really used to, at this point, not talking to somebody on the phone. They're used to doing things on their own time.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, if you look at like CPG companies, they're still spending a fair amount of money in traditional media, but it's clearly digital is a bigger part of the budget than it has been, and it increases. So I think it's still relevant, but again, I think ultimately it's what are the goals of, it gets back to, you know, from a strategic perspective, is it what's the role of the different medium? I don't think they're less relevant. I just think digital's more relevant.
Yeah, and it's the audience that you're trying to target. Just knowing that audience is really crucial, and knowing that audience includes knowing what type of media that they use. You there are different services that you can use to really start to do your audience segmentation and know exactly how they're using media, and your audience, your media mix should kind of mirror the audience segmentation that you have for your marketing. So those resources are out there.
That makes sense, especially as Apple and Google keep finding ways to filter out, potential spam caller, until we figure out a way for the Post Office to do that. Also, as a millennial side note, mail is kind of novel. It's kind of fun getting a piece of mail, even if it's from a company that's directed to me. I'm going to read it. So, I think that's all the questions we have for today. Oh, as a reminder, yes, the presentation and the recording will be available tomorrow on the website. But Emily, I think we have a couple of plugs here at the end. You already talked about MBPI. And then please consider joining us not next week, but the week after next. We're going to have Jason Littman and Hackensack Meridian Health Carrier Clinic, Donald J. Parker, and they're going to be talking about social determinants of health in the new normal. I think that'll be pretty interesting. So please consider joining us for that one. And I think that's about it for today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, John and Emily, for your time. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Emily and Sam.